Hello, Gardener's World. I'm John Turner, and I'm joining you from the state of Missouri in the central United States. Specifically, we're in the Ozarks mountain region, and being a hard gardener here is hard work because we have no soil. It's just a very thin layer of topsoil that covers a lot of rocks and clay, so it's really hard to be a gardener here. So I want to show you some tips of what we use in order to make beautiful gardens here when you have no soil. We have to buy our soil, and so what I do is I go to a local garden center and I purchase topsoil. But when I purchase that topsoil and they're putting it into the dump truck, I have them layer the topsoil with topsoil and then compost. And then when they come to my house, I have them drop it in a location, so usually it's a big mound, and they dump a big mound there. Then I get out the wheelbarrow and the rakes and the shovels, and then I spread it out. And so typically I do that in the fall. And then what I do then is after everything gets spread out, my new soil gets spread out, then I go through and add a couple of inches of compost on top and spread that out. And then I go back and get a load of chipped arborist chips that are used after they cut down trees and chip them up. And I make a very thin layer of that to keep the bed over the winter. Sometimes if I'm a little brave, I'll go through and even plant in tulips and daffodils in there, although I usually wait until the second season to do that. This particular bed has been in about 5 years now. And again, it's that same rock hard soil underneath, but I've just put that small layer, usually about 8 inches to a foot of topsoil and compost mix on top. And then year after year after year, every fall, spring, I add a couple of inches of compost, and you can see you can grow great gardens on top of really poor soil. When you only have a small amount of space, you have to get as much out of your soil as you possibly can. So here we are in June, and you can see my zinnias are coming up, and my spider flowers and my tall phlox are beginning to bloom, and even my crocosmia are starting to bloom. But what I did is back in February and March, I came in and planted veg in this bed. So for example, I had lettuce, and I had radishes, and I had carrots, and also I put in small onion plants. And you can see this time of year, as the flowers are coming on, I can come in and I can pull out my onions. And so it's really sort of a great deal. I get my flowers and my veg in the same flower bed. Again, in an attempt to try to get as much bloom as I possibly can out of my limited soil, another trick that I love to use is I love to plant vining plants inside of shrubs. And so while my clematis is a little bit over, you can see my hydrangea here. Okay, it's not going to bloom probably for another 3 weeks or so, but you can see inside of it, I've planted this beautiful blue clematis. And so what happens is it grows up through the hydrangea, we get a first blush, and then it goes over, and then the hydrangea comes on later. And I do that with a lot of different things. For example, I've got a variegated dogwood that I have a beautiful clematis that grows up through it. Again, just extending the color. And by the way, it's one of the things that gardeners come by all the time and say, what plant is that? And they don't realize that I've tricked them by growing a climber inside of a shrub or a small tree. I hate to go on and on about my onions, but another trick that I do when I'm out picking my onions in the summer, there's always a few that underperform, and I can look down and see that the bulbs are very small. And so sometimes it's because I've planted them too close, or who knows why. But you know what I always do? I leave a few onions in my flower border when I'm pulling them up. And then what happens is they just stay in the border all summer. Nobody really notices, and if they do, they see some the spikes of the onions there. But I leave them in over the winter, and then in the spring, the great surprise comes on, is that those onions in the second year, they send up their flowers, and the flowers are beautiful. These are a few weeks over now, but then I just leave the flowers on, and then they set these really neat seed heads that are this silvery white. This is an onion variety called Candy. And so sometimes just leaving some onions in the garden can be a real winner as far as the attractiveness of your flower border the following year. So there's a great tip. I just wanted to show all my friends that you can grow a great garden, a lush garden, if you just bring in some soil, take good care of it, and again, use those tricks about interspersing things inside the flower patch that are also veg, and you can make a really great garden even with really bad soil. Happy gardening!